Bibliophiles of the internet. Today I'm here to do the Get to Know My Taste tag created by Mari from My Name is Marinez and Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. If you've ever wanted to hear me talk about my reading taste, how I choose what I read next, how I rate and review books, so on and so forth, then you're in the right place. I will link both Sam and Mari's videos down below, so be sure to check them out. But this is pretty straightforward stuff, so we're just gonna jump right in with the first question. Number 1, how do you rate books? I use the 5-star rating system, and I know it's not a perfect system. I fully acknowledge that. It can be very limiting in some ways, but I keep using it because it continues to have value as a universally understood shorthand. If I say a book is 5 stars, you know right away what that means. If I say that a book is 1 star, you know what that means. It's a very simple way to convey enjoyment and impact. In the past year or so, I've also implemented the use of quarter stars on occasion, mostly because Storygraph has quarter stars and allows its users to be a little bit more specific, which I think is nice. And I know they can seem finicky, I know it can feel like just splitting hairs, but again, there is nuance between a book that is 3.25 stars and a book that's 3.5 stars. It just gives you a little more space within that limited 5-star range to accurately convey how a book made you feel at a glance, which I personally find helpful, and in turn hope that it helps other folks consuming my reviews. Number 2, how do you approach reviewing books? What's your review style? Are you analytical, emotional, casual, or structured? I like to think I capture all of those styles in my reviews. I would definitely lean towards saying that I'm more structured and analytical, although what a book makes me feel is also an integral part of every single one of my reviews. I've also said this before, but I think I offer a unique perspective because I have a degree in writing, and I've spent many years of my life studying writing and craft in formal settings. So I tend to talk about how a book is structured, how it's told, if it's implementing any unique or notable aspects of craft, whether the way it's crafted works, and you will also always find me talking about a book's thematic overtures and how I think its thematic work fits into the context of our world. When I review a book, yes, I'm trying to convey whether I liked it or not, what I liked about it, whether I think it works or not, but I'm always striving to answer the question of what is this book really about? What does this book really have to say? And I hope to provide at least some kind of answer to those underlying questions by the end of my reviews. I also say that I'm structured because I have a clear structure to the way I deliver my reviews. I will always start with a brief synopsis in my own words, then I'll give content warnings, then I'll give my review, and end with a star rating if I have one. And none of those parts are up for debate, by the way. I truly and honestly do not care whether people want to know what a book is about or not, if they care about content warnings or not. Providing as much context as possible is really important to me, and I think the more information people have about a book, the more informed decision they can make regarding whether it's a book they want to spend their time, energy, and potentially money on in the future. So I believe it's my responsibility to share that context, and then you can use it or not. Number 3, what's the book that made you a reader? Whether it was your first favorite or one that got you hooked, what was the book that started it all? I've always been an avid reader from childhood, so it's hard to pinpoint where exactly that started. I also began reading independently at a very, very young age, so I did really love those classic chapter book series like Junie B. Jones and the Magic Treehouse series. Those were definitely staples in my household and titles I would always try to track down at like the Scholastic Book Fair and things like that. One of the earliest books I can remember being assigned to read in school that I think really solidified my love of reading was The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. Now, this book was first published in the early 60s by an old white guy who could ostensibly be a horrible person who believed horrible things. I do not know for sure, but damn, do I still love this book. It's this whimsical fantasy story about this extremely lonely and listless boy named Milo who does not see the point in anything. And one day he comes home from school to discover this huge gift box in his living room, and when he opens it and assembles everything inside, he ends up with a small car, a toll booth, and a toll booth token. So he gets in the car, he drives up to the toll booth, puts in the token, and as soon as he drives past, he is transported to a completely different world. And this fantasy world is divided into 2 warring kingdoms, the kingdom of words and the kingdom of numbers, and his job is to help them recover their 2 missing princesses, Rhyme and Reason, and help the kingdoms reunite. To this day, The Phantom Tollbooth remains one of the most unique fantasy stories I have ever read. It's whimsical, it's funny, it's full of puns and turns of phrase, it's incredibly imaginative, and it stands the test of time because I've reread it many times throughout my life, even as an adult. Number 4, do you have a genre niche? Are there certain genres you tend to gravitate towards? towards, or do you read widely across genres? I am famously unboxable as a reader, as in you will find it impossible to force me into a box. I truly do read a little bit of everything. I am deeply fascinated by a vast number of genres, and I don't like to limit myself in what I read simply because there are so many worthwhile stories to discover out there, regardless of the genre. It's kind of become a running joke with myself that I can never read more than one book in a row of the same genre. I can jump from like a sci-fi mystery to a historical fantasy to contemporary romance to a memoir or essay collection. What I'm gonna pick up next is not only a surprise to me most of the time, but it truly is anyone's guess. If you watch my stats videos, you know my most read genres are all over the place. If we're just going off the raw data, I read a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, romance, and horror. But again, the numbers only tell part of the story, and I definitely read both within and beyond all of those genres. Number 5, do you generally prefer character-driven or plot-driven stories? The word generally is doing a lot of heavy lifting here because ¿por qué no las dos? I understand what this question is getting at, but I also think it kind of reinforces a false dichotomy because obviously any good story that's doing what it's supposed to do should ideally be employing both a compelling plot and compelling characters. So I will not compromise my belief that I think both are necessary for a truly good story. If I absolutely had to choose between the two for some entirely made-up reason, I think I would lean towards character-driven stories, because as exciting as it is to read a fast-paced story that's driven by a high-concept plot, if I don't care about the characters and if the characters don't inspire genuine emotion, then there's not going to be much for me to take away from that story, and it probably won't stay with me for a very long time. Number 6, what's a book you love so much that you don't care if others like it? Say it with me. Cemetery Boys. I know it seems like a joke answer at this point, but I actually mean it very sincerely. It's a book that genuinely changed my life, and it spoke to me on a level that not every reader is going to be able to access, but it reflected myself and my life in ways that no other story had before that point. Luckily, the vast majority of people who read Cemetery Boys also love it, but it's one of those books where I truly and honestly do not care what anyone else thinks of it because it just has such an important place in my life and in my heart. Number 7. What's a book you love so much that if someone doesn't like it, you know that your reading tastes don't align? I mean, I could also say Cemetery Boys for this, although I tend to be more forgiving in the sense that I understand that a lot of people won't or can't connect with it as deeply as I do, and that's okay. But my real answer is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. If you can't at least respect the mastery on display in that book, in that trilogy, then we most likely do not align in what we value in books, much less our reading taste. Another easy litmus test is Jade City by Fonda Lee, especially if you're someone who loves fantasy and you don't consider that trilogy to be among the greats, then I'm not really sure what we're doing. On the flip side, more generally, if I see that someone loves Silvia Moreno Garcia, especially given the fact that she is an incredible genre chameleon, that is an instant green flag. Obviously, take this with a grain of salt. I am not constantly putting new-to-me book reviewers on trial or anything like that, and of course I follow and respect people who have very different tastes than mine, but very generally I think those 3 big hitters coupled with whether or not someone is actually reading from marginalized authors is a solid way for me to decide whose content is worth my time and who actually represents a safe space. I'm gonna skip question number 8, which is about what's in your quote-unquote trash pocket, what books, tropes, or themes you know are bad for you that you love anyway, because I do not have an answer for that. Number 9, do you have any deal breakers in books? Something that, if present, immediately turns you off from a book? You know, I'm not really a big DNFer, and I don't say that as a point of pride either. I don't think any less of people who DNF books. In fact, I respect them for knowing their limitations and protecting their time and energy. And I always talk about this when I talk about how I choose the books I read and why my ratings tend to be higher more often than not, but I've just been doing this for a really long time. I've done a lot of work cultivating my reading taste and learning what it is that resonates with me most, and I've become very good at honing in on books that I'm very likely to enjoy and be impacted by in a positive way. And also I think because I read so widely, I go into what I read with a very open mind. So there's very little, if anything, that would make me stop reading a book or instantly start hating a book. I can usually find at least a few redeeming qualities. Very broadly speaking, some things that will prevent a book from being 5 stars are bad writing, underdeveloped characters, rushed or convenient endings, mustache-twirling villains, and stories that spell out their message rather than doing the work to allow the reader to come to their own conclusions. And of course, it should should go without saying, but if a book is perpetuating racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, ableism, etc., without actually contending with those issues in a meaningful way, then that book is not for me. Again, fortunately, those are not things I run into often, but when they do come up, I will definitely point them out. Number 10, what's a strong opinion you have about a book released within the last year? Whether it's overrated, underrated, or just a take you need to share. I will use this prompt as an excuse to show some more love for Libertad by Bessie Flores Zaldivar, which I think is criminally underrated and did not get the marketing push it truly deserved. It's a queer YA coming-of-age story set in Honduras following a teenager named Libertad who is living through the rigged presidential election of 2017 and who finds solace in writing radical political poetry on an anonymous social media account. But everything changes when she finds out that her brother might be risking his life to attend some very dangerous protests, and her mom also finds text messages on her phone alluding to the fact that Libertad has been kissing girls. And the story is really about how their family is contending with all of that change. I've said this before, but while this can be a hard-hitting, difficult book to read at times, I don't think that makes it any less worthwhile. It's a truly beautiful testament to the power of community and the necessity of being critical of the things and people you love most, because expecting those things and people to meet a higher standard is how we achieve change in the first place. Number 11, what do you look for in writing? What makes a book stand out to you? Is it prose style, themes, voice, structure, or something else? This is such a broad question, and I feel like I'm definitely going to forget something, but mostly at the end of the day, I'm just looking for stories that have personality, that have a point of view, and that have something to say. And all of those things can show up in so many different shapes and forms. I love a strong, unique voice. I love witticism and humor when it's appropriate. I love writing that is steeped in emotion and makes you feel something. If a story is transportative and utilizes powerful imagery, evocative prose, imaginative ideas, I consider all of those things to be a plus. When a story is written well, I think you can feel it. It feels good to read and to hear, and the best writers are the ones who make storytelling feel effortless and seamless. Not to sound like a broken record, but because I read so widely across so many different genres, I'm open to a lot of different styles, and I get exposed to a lot of different styles. Different kinds of stories require a different touch, and like I said before, when all is said and done, I'm just looking to be moved, and I'm looking for stories that actually have something worthwhile to say. Number 12, how do you decide what to read next? Do you plan ahead, mood read, or follow external factors like hype, recommendations, arcs, etc.? I fall somewhere between a planner and a mood reader. Going into a new month, I always have a list of things that I would like to read if I have the time, and what goes on that list is a mixture of books I have for review, books I'm in the mood to read, and books that I have access to. For example, if I know a library hold is coming through. But even though I have an outline or a vague idea of what I would like to read next, I always leave myself room to change my mind. Maybe I get some book mail that shakes up my TBR. Maybe something I requested from my library comes through sooner than I thought. Maybe there's a bookish event like a readathon or a buddy read that I want to take part in. I don't hold myself prisoner to my list of possibilities. I just go with what feels right. Number 13, where do you get inspiration for your booktube content? I don't think of myself as an especially inspired content creator. I'm not the kind of person that makes experimental content, chases trends, or does what's popular, and I'm not saying that to condemn anyone who does or to imply that my approach to content is the superior approach. I assure you, it's not. That's just not me, and it never has been. I'm just not one to keep up with the Joneses. I've been doing this so long that my priority when it comes to content planning and content creation is sustainability, first and foremost. I ask myself, what is within my power, my interest, my expertise, and my energy to make in this moment? My one staple video I make every month is a reading wrap-up, so that's 1 week taken care of. But besides that, I try to think about how I can make content based off what I'm already reading or planning to read. Maybe I look at what's happening seasonally and make videos based off of that. Maybe I get inspired by my fellow content creators and make content that's in conversation with what they're making. When all is said and done, I just love reading and sharing books, and I want to make content that allows me to review and or recommend as many books as I can. And I also want to enjoy what I'm making. I try to make the content that I want to see myself, while also holding the boundary of not taking on too much. At the end of the day, this is not my job. It's a passion project. It's something I keep doing because I enjoy doing it, not because I'm chasing numbers or chasing trends. And if I want to preserve and protect that joy, I have to balance what I think people are interested in seeing with what I am capable of providing in that moment. Number 14, if you could make any book go viral right now, what would it be? This is the hill I will continue to die on because for the last 2 years, ever since this book came out, I have never once come across another soul talking about it. Not on BookTube, Bookstagram, Book Talk, any other book spaces. And that's not to say that no one is reading it, but if they are, I'm not hearing about it. And that's a problem that I'm gonna make everyone else's problem. I am, of course, talking about Alexander Hamon's masterpiece, The World and All That It Holds. This is an immaculate queer piece of historical fiction set at the literal dawn of World War I, when the main character Pinto actually witnesses firsthand the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Pinto is this very easygoing, almost listless person who would love nothing more than to keep working at the pharmacy he inherited from his father. But of course, with war breaking out and subsuming his small Bosnian village, he no longer has that choice. After being enlisted in the war, he meets a fellow soldier named Osman, and the two of them end up not only falling in love, but attempting to escape the war together. They end up getting separated, and the story is following them on this years-long journey as refugees as they try to not only find a place to call home, but also find their way back to each other. There are not words and superlatives strong enough to convey how I feel about this book. It is thoughtful, it's soul-filling, it's incredibly beautiful, and it's able to flip the script in that it's not so much a quote-unquote war story, but more so a tender and heartfelt story about how searching for home is really about searching for ourselves. But at the same time, it's also very much about the impacts of war, especially on refugees, which is a side of the story I feel like we don't get told enough. I am constantly on hands and knees begging people to give this book a chance, so please give this book a chance. And finally, number 15, who are booktubers with reading tastes similar to yours? I'm going to shout out quite a few people here. None of them have a perfect 100% overlap with what I like to read or tend to read, but I find that where we do overlap is pretty significant. First, I have to shout out one of the OGs, Ashley from Bookish Realm, although I believe she's moved to a new channel called Realm of Kidlit Comics. I'm pretty sure Ashley and I started our channels around the same time, so we've been in the game together for many, many years. We've seen a lot of things, and I just have so much respect for her and everything she does. She is a professional librarian and an absolutely voracious reader, especially when it comes to picture books, comics, graphic novels, middle grade books, and young adult books. So again, she reads way more than I do, but every time I go to add a book to my want to read or currently reading shelf on Storygraph or Goodreads and I see a positive review from Ashley at the top of my friends feed, I know I am going to enjoy myself. I also have to show some love to Alex from Pucks and Paperbacks, who is a truly amazing trans creator in this space who's always making exciting and interesting content. But aside from that, he tends to read a lot of queer books like I do, so we tend to read and enjoy a lot of the same things. I also love Tori's videos, Tori Morrow. She specializes in reading and recommending sci-fi and fantasy books especially. We don't always read the same things, but the books or series where we do overlap tend to be some of my favorites, and she's also put a lot of really cool SFF titles on my radar that weren't there before. In a similar realm is Angela from Literature Science Alliance. She is also pretty heavy on the sci-fi and fantasy reads, although she does also read general fiction and romance as well. And it's not that we read all the same things and have the same opinions on them, because we don't, but it's one of those things where, again, if I see that she's especially excited about a book, I know it's very likely that it will be of interest to me as well. Another OG who just keeps the good content coming is Reagan from Peruse Project. She's pretty well-rounded in her reading taste, not only reading sci-fi and fantasy, but also general fiction, romance, romantasy, historical fiction. Again, we don't always read exactly the same things, but I find her reviews to be very thoughtful and even-keeled, and when we do overlap, those tend to be some of my favorite books. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Mina from Mina Reads. She's awesome, she's funny, she's relatable and real. She does read way more romance than I do, but because our tastes slightly diverge in that way, I can find some really good and surprising recommendations from her content. Lastly, I want to mention someone who's a bit newer in the booktube space. He started on Book Talk, but he does post the occasional long-form video here on YouTube, and that is Nick from Bookbench. Not to sound like a broken record once again, but we actually don't tend to read a lot of the same things. He reads a lot more lit fic than I do, but I've been able to find some really unique and interesting recommendations from his videos. And when he gets excited about a book, I know it's most likely going to be something special. Case in point, I never would have heard about Valid by Chris Bergeron if I didn't watch his videos, and that book was phenomenal. So there you have it. That is the Get to Know My taste tag. If you've been around for a minute, I'm sure none of that was a surprise, but hopefully it was interesting all the same. I will officially tag all the channels I mentioned in that last question, but if you also make book-related videos, feel free to do this tag yourself. If you want to answer any of these questions yourself, feel free to head down to the comments and do so, but that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself and others, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.